600 men were told they had bad blood. That's it. 2 words. And a lie that would last 40 years. They lined up for free meals, free rides to the clinic, free burial insurance for their families. What they didn't know was that the government studying them already had the cure sitting in a cabinet and chose not to give it to them. For 4 decades, doctors watched men waste away, watched their spines curl, watched blindness set in, watched them infect their wives, their children, unborn babies. And every single time a man asked, "When do I get better?" and he was handed an aspirin, a vitamin, and a smile. This wasn't ancient history. This wasn't some forgotten kingdom. This happened in the United States of America, and it kept happening long after penicillin could have ended it in a single injection. Somewhere, in a locked government file cabinet, there is a letter, a real letter, instructing local doctors to make sure these men never received treatment anywhere else. Because if they got better, the experiment would be ruined. What kind of government protects an experiment over the lives of its own citizens? What kind of silence lasts 40 years without cracking? Stay with us, because the deeper you go into this story, the darker it gets. 1932, Macon County, Alabama. The Great Depression was strangling the rural South, and poverty had a particular color in this part of the country. The United States Public Health Service arrived with a promise wrapped in kindness. They partnered with the Tuskegee Institute and a respected black college and told local sharecroppers they were offering something priceless: free health care for life. 600 black men were recruited. 399 already carried syphilis, untreated and undiagnosed. 201 did not. They were the control group, though none of them knew that word, or what it meant for their bodies. The men were never told the actual name of their condition. Bad blood became the euphemism, vague enough to cover syphilis, anemia, and fear itself. In exchange, they received hot meals on clinic days, transportation, and the guarantee of a decent burial, a devastating incentive where funeral costs could bankrupt a family for a generation. What they were never told was the study's actual purpose. This was never meant to treat syphilis. It was designed to observe it, to watch, without intervention, exactly how the disease destroyed the human body, from first sore to final, agonizing stage. The researchers had a private phrase for this approach: observation only. The men believed they were patients. They were not. They were subjects, numbers in a ledger, tracked not toward recovery, but toward autopsy. And then, in 1947, something happened that should have ended this nightmare overnight. Penicillin, a cheap, fast, effective cure for syphilis, became widely available across the country. The government funding this study didn't celebrate. They panicked, because a cure meant their 40-year experiment might be over before it had barely begun. Here is the truth the government buried for 4 decades. They didn't just withhold penicillin. They actively worked to prevent these men from getting it anywhere else. When World War II drafted several of the participants, the study's doctors wrote directly to draft boards, not to protect the men's health, but to keep them out of military clinics where they might accidentally be cured. Local physicians across Macon County received quiet instructions. If any of the 600 came asking for treatment, turn them away. Redirect them back to the study. Imagine that, an entire regional network of doctors, silently coordinated to keep sick men sick. The men underwent excruciating, non-therapeutic spinal taps, painful procedures marketed to them as special free treatment, when in reality, the fluid was extracted purely to measure how far the disease had progressed into their nervous systems. Records show researchers referring to these procedures internally as the end point, a chilling phrase meaning only one thing: they were waiting for the men to die, so their bodies could be autopsied for data. And here is the moment that redefines everything. This was never hidden in shadows. It was published, openly, in medical journals. More than a dozen papers detailing the disease's brutal progression appeared in respected publications between the 1930s and the 1960s. Doctors across America read about it, discussed it, referenced it. For 30 years, this was not classified. It was simply accepted. Wives contracted syphilis from husbands who were never told they were contagious. Children were born with congenital syphilis, a fate entirely preventable with a single course of antibiotics that sat, unused, in pharmacies across the country. By the late 1960s, over 100 of the original men had died directly from syphilis or its complications. Others had gone blind, insane, paralyzed, and the government's own internal review board looked at all of this and voted to continue the study anyway. It took one man, working from the inside, to finally break the silence. Peter Buxton, a venereal disease investigator, raised his concerns internally in 1966. He was dismissed. He raised them again in 1968. Dismissed again. So in 1972, he did something the government never expected. He went to the press. Reporter Gene Heller broke the story through the Associated Press, and the headline landed like a detonation across the entire country. The government had knowingly allowed hundreds of black men to suffer and die from a curable disease for 40 years. Public outrage was immediate and unimaginable. A Senate subcommittee launched hearings. The study was shut down that same year, not because the researchers stopped believing in it, but because the world finally found out. A class action lawsuit followed. Survivors and families received a settlement, but no amount of money could reverse blindness, undo insanity, or bring back the dead. It took 25 more years, 25, before the government offered anything resembling an apology. In 1997, President Bill Clinton stood before survivors, some in wheelchairs, and formally apologized on behalf of the United States government. Only 8 of the original 600 men were still alive to hear it. But the damage didn't end with the last survivor. This single betrayal planted a seed of distrust that grew for generations. A documented, measurable hesitancy toward medical institutions within black communities across America, one that researchers still study today. When public health officials struggled decades later to convince communities to trust new vaccines and treatments, they were not fighting ignorance. They were fighting memory. The memory of 600 men who trusted their government completely and were repaid with silence, deception, and death. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it wears a white coat. Sometimes it hides behind a clipboard, a kind smile, and the word free. The Tuskegee study didn't survive 40 years because it was hidden in darkness. It survived because too many people, in laboratories, in newsrooms, in government offices, looked directly at the truth and chose silence instead. That is the real lesson buried inside this story. Institutions rarely lie to you with a single dramatic act. They lie slowly, one small omission at a time, until an entire lifetime has passed, and the truth arrives decades too late to save the people who needed it most. So we have to ask ourselves, what is being called bad blood today? What quiet euphemism, spoken in some office right now, is hiding a truth someone doesn't want to face? What silent letter, sitting in some file right now, is quietly deciding whose suffering is acceptable and whose isn't? Tell us in the comments what you think. And if this story shook you the way it shook us, subscribe, because history is still hiding secrets, and we're not done digging.